Arjun, I could hear the passion in your voice when you're talking about reading, and I know you're a voracious reader.
Thank you.
So, small deviation from our topic of discussion. For a non-reader or for somebody who's not a very evolved or active reader, what 5 books would you recommend that they start with?
Thank you. One of my favorite questions in the whole world.
Yeah, I know you so well.
Can I give you 50?
I'd love to take a list of 50 books, but let's start with 5 now.
Great. Excellent. All right. So going back to the real root, something really basic, a book that was written, I believe, way back in the 1930s. All right. Fundamental. And here's the thing, when you're reading books that have been written decades ago, or in this case, a book that's been written 90 years ago, many of the examples that are being used are examples from the 1930s or thereabouts, whenever it was written. Don't put the book down because those examples are of the 1930s, but read for, pay attention to the principles that are being taught in the book. All right. So I want to mention that as a caveat up front, so that you don't read the book and say, you put it aside. No. What's the tool? What's the principle? What's the idea? What's the underlying fundamental that the author is talking about? Because an application of that in today's environment also is going to create tremendous results. So that's the first caveat. The second caveat is, when you read things that have been written by these very, very successful and accomplished people, many of these ideas will possibly make you uncomfortable. And the reason those ideas will make you uncomfortable is not because those ideas don't work. It is because you have never done those ideas before. And because you have never done it before, it is a foreign concept to you, and therefore you feel resistance to change, the RC factor. Resistance to change. Okay. Now the third caveat, and after that I'm going to name the books, is that treat books like a buffet. And at least in the country that we live in, when we go to an elaborate buffet, a buffet typically has 50 or more items. There are 10 salads, there are about 15 different desserts, there are another, 20 or 30 different main courses. There's the rice, there's the pasta, there's different kinds of meat, vegetables, there's lentils, and so on and so forth. If you add up everything, including the condiments, there's probably 50 items in most buffets that we go for. Many of them have got even more items than that. And when you go to a buffet that has 50 or more items, and typically a book does have so many ideas and tools, you and me both know that when we're getting started in a journey like this, and I apply this even today, you cannot eat all those 50 items. It's just not possible. It's ridiculous. You may eat the fish, I may eat the chicken. You may eat the vegetables, I may eat the pasta. You may prefer the rice, I may eat the lentils. I have a preference, you have a preference, but in a buffet of 50 items, you can certainly satisfy yourself, and I can certainly satisfy yourself. Now, in the buffet, I'm going to look for items that I like. I will not stand by the item that I don't like and complain about it, because there are at least 30 items that I like. And in a book, there will be at least 10, 20 or 30 items that you do like, and focus on the items that you do like, not the items that you do not like. All right, so I need to say this to anybody, and this is what holds people back from reading. This is the buffet, and let's start with book number 1, The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. Okay, so that's book number 1. Book number 2, Today Matters. Today Matters by John Maxwell. Today Matters by John Maxwell. Okay, so that's book number 2. Please remember those 3 caveats that I mentioned. Book number 3, Goals. Goals by Brian Tracy. Goals by Brian Tracy. Book number 4, You Are the Placebo. You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. Okay, and I'm thinking which one to put as number 5 because then I've got so many of these options. I'm like, okay, let me just pick one out of the sky. But let me just tell you about a book which I have recently completed rereading of. And this is my 3rd read of this book. A book, again, that was written way back in the 1930s, full of examples of back in the day, 1940s, 30s, and so forth. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. So these are books which kind of inspire, and I've given you a nice mix of books that are right brain and left brain oriented. The book by Brian Tracy on goals, for example, is very strategic, structured, systematic, particular, detailed oriented. Again, that's a buffet that book, just Goals by Brian Tracy, is a buffet with 500 items. 500 items. You will not be able to eat all of it. You can read all of it and keep going back and saying, okay, today I'm going to eat these 5 and I'm going to use these 5 for the next week, month, quarter, and so on and so forth. Some of the businesses that I work with, again, this depends on the strategic objectives of the organization and the value system of the organization. We actually start with a book and we say, okay, what can we do with principles? So we choose a book that resonates, that is in resonance with the organization's strategic objectives and values. And we can definitely find them. Then too, we treat the book as a buffet and take buffet items from that book. Now, these are tools, strategies, ideas, principles, and concepts for leaders, staff, and the organization as a whole to now apply, and now being driven by leadership, now looking at a chapter or a subsection of a chapter, causing people in teams to not just study the chapter, but imbibe the concepts of that chapter in their professional life, and if they choose to, optional, voluntarily, in their personal lives. Having discussions around with teams and team leaders on how those tools from that book is helping them to enhance themselves, is helping them to do things faster, better, cheaper, is helping them to grow profits, enhance reputation, and make the organization a better place to work in. So yeah, these are the books, caveats, books, and the concept of reading, and hopefully me having given you context of this whole thing, and when I say you, Sajni, I'm talking about to all of you who are listening to this, will cause you to at least have some amount of curiosity to actually now, it's okay if you start curious, just get curious about reading, and once you're curious about reading, maybe later in life you can become, or later in time you can become serious about reading. So be curious and then gradually see if you can become serious.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Arj. I think we should do a separate conversation on reading and some of your favorite books. Maybe we'll plan that for another time. You reread books is something that you mentioned. So that's a point that I would like to discuss further, maybe on another conversation, because I'm sure many of our viewers would be surprised that you reread books not just twice but thrice, and it's almost like a research that you do on the book. So fantastic. So in the interest of time, I'm going to come back to our topic of discussion and ask you one last question, which is, what would be your top 3 key recommendations to make our organization a happy place to work in, considering the barrage of emotions that we've experienced in the last so many weeks, some positive, some not so positive. So how do we go about bringing in happiness and engagement within the organization?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. So, the Dubai government takes the concept of happiness very, very seriously. And they have a ministry and they call it the Happiness Ministry. I I noticed it recently. Perhaps I've seen it before, but I noticed it for the first time recently when I paid my Diva bill online. And it said, the message, and I'm paraphrasing, it said, "Thank you for making Dubai the happiest city in the world." And to me, that was fascinating that a government could set that out as a mandate that we want to make this the happiest city in the world. Now, admittedly, we might have hurdles along the way. You can't go from where you are to absolute happiness in a flash, in a heartbeat. There are going to be some missteps and errors and so forth, and feedback is required. And sometimes we may go 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or sometimes 2 steps back and then 3 steps forward. So that it's so important to recognize that whenever you apply a strategy, particularly a strategy towards happiness, and let's say the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you do, when you do them, it doesn't seem to be giving you results. The worst thing to do is to put your hands up in the air and say, it doesn't work. Okay, we're going home. We're going to pack our bags and go away. That's like going to the gym for 1 workout and saying, oh, I'm not Arnold Schwarzenegger. Gymming doesn't work and you go home. No.
Happens all the time, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Whether it's gymming or yoga or running or floor exercises or even learning a new language, goodness gracious, you can't do 1 or 2 or 3 sessions and expect stupendous results. You've got to be consistent. My teacher taught me a long time ago, he said, if you want to get good at something, do that thing at least 10 times. So for example, in sales, when we're teaching someone to use a new strategy that they've never used before, the first time they do it, it usually doesn't work because you've never done it before. And then when it doesn't work, you stop doing it. That's ridiculous. Come on, keep doing it again and again until it becomes second nature. Now you develop a new habit. And this new habit now overtakes the earlier habit and you get good at it. So remember, this is the foundation with regard to application of strategy. And this is the reason why many companies are fearful, or I call it SNIOP, S-N-I-O-P, susceptible to the negative influence of other people. And you got to be very, very careful in a large organization with respect and love and admiration to every employee in the organization. There are some who are admittedly far ahead in their thinking with regard to optimism, and there are some perhaps who are not. And as leaders, we need to be conscious and conscientious that when we're applying a strategy, we're going to have both energies working in the domain. We're going to have the energies of optimism, people who want to do it. We're going to have the energies of pessimism, people who are pulling back towards the status quo. And you and I both know now that if today now, the thing that will be to the detriment of an individual or an organization is to stay in the status quo. So now let's look at the 3 strategies. The first strategy is called camaraderie. Okay, so the word is camaraderie. And camaraderie, you might say, oh, hang on, that's teamwork. Yes, it is teamwork. It certainly is. And I'm not going to say but, I'm going to say and, it goes beyond teamwork. And it goes beyond teamwork into diversity. And when we get into diversity, so in 2019, the United Arab Emirates had something called as the Year of Tolerance. Great. Fabulous beginning for this nation that has come from a relatively conservative space, and now is expanding their mindset. And this is coming from the leaders of the country. They call it tolerance. And now I sense that we're moving beyond and forward. So you start with the tolerance of diversity, which means, now when I say diversity, diversity can be nationality, it could be religious, spiritual beliefs or belief systems. It could even just be people who are from the same country and same city, but think very different.
Yeah.
Diversity could be gender diversity, it could be age diversity, it could be educational diversity. That's what I'm talking about. So people who are different, you and me as human beings are different because we have a different nature and a different nurture. Your upbringing has been different from my upbringing, and has been different from the upbringing of the person sitting to your left and sitting to your right in the office. And so you cannot expect them to be like you or think like you. When you expect them to now concur, to conform to your thinking paradigms, particularly you as a leader, be mindful that when people talk differently, think differently, behave differently than you, don't get offended. Most people don't mean to offend you when they speak in a certain way or do certain things. This is their paradigm of how they behave and talk. Some people speak in a louder tone of voice. Doesn't mean they're rude. Their upbringing has taught them to be this way. Some people tend to be passive and submissive, but that's your perception that they are passive and submissive. I have found passive and submissive people to be very persistent. And so you've got to step out of your framework and say, am I measuring people by a standard that I have set? And this standard is something that you have created based on your life experiences, and now you expect everybody to conform to those standards. There are people who are very different than you, who are able to take a similar department that you are in another organization, in a similar industry, to super success. And they're so different than you. But when they come into your department, you and them disagree and have conflict. Why is that? Think about that for a moment. And now we blame the person for having a bad attitude and so on and so forth. So this is at the base of tolerance, saying, hang on a second, Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand, then seek to be understood. Let me endeavor to, from my heart space, to now expand and understand the other person. And then you move from tolerance to acceptance. So tolerance of diversity is all of what I've spoken about now. Now you say, listen, let me accept this human being, this man, woman, this person who is a husband, wife, mother, son, daughter, whatever, brother, sister. They are a human being just like you. Let me accept them for what they are, and now evoke their strengths from that place, from their paradigm wherein they are. When you permit people to operate out of their systems and their belief systems, and give them an environment where they are able to give expression to their strengths, you will now notice magical things happen. So we tolerate diversity, then we accept diversity. And once we accept diversity, we can now start to celebrate diversity. Tolerate diversity, accept diversity, and celebrate diversity. And all this is camaraderie, and that's the first strategy. And I'm being brief here because I know we're short on time. Let's go to strategy number 2. Strategy number 2 is education. Is organizational education. Most people stop, and we spoke about reading earlier, stop reading, studying, learning the moment they finish their diploma or their degree. And we cannot afford in today's environment, regardless of the industry you are in and how much of a customer base you have, how successful you have been. Your biography doesn't necessarily have to be your destiny. You could have had a fabulously successful past that does not guarantee a continually successful future. We cannot use the same systems and strategies that we used in the past into the future. And so education is learning new things. And I'm not only talking about learning positive thinking, but there are technologies today that you can consciously get people curious to learn about. And I understand you guys are doing things with Microsoft Excel, you guys have been doing. I've had other organizations do things where they're teaching their people to use LinkedIn, and using LinkedIn, for example, to get customers or to make contacts or to network. These are great tools. Artificial intelligence is a huge subject that we all need to be aware of. It is going to affect our business in ways that we cannot even begin to understand. Robotics. I'm working, coaching a guy who comes from a finance background. He's a purely finance guy. He is studying artificial intelligence, robotics, and social media in order to help his current organization do better than it has ever done before. It would be easy for him to say, I don't have a science background, so I can't learn all this stuff. He said, no, I can learn. If I can learn finance, I can learn technology. It's not impossible. It's challenging because you've never done it before, but education. And have a brainstorming session in the organization saying that if we could wave a magic wand, then educate our people on any subject that is available in the world today. What subjects would we educate our people on in order to support our business? Great, empowering question. It's called the magic wand question. Ask this question and make the list of subjects. Don't say which subjects do we need to learn, because then we say, then we can't, won't, shouldn't. not possible those words come up. But say if we could wave a magic wand and we could magically educate all our people in any subject that we could, what are the subjects that we would magically educate our teams, our staff, that would support our business and strategic objectives now and in the future? Now make the list of subjects. Do this with senior leaders. Here's the other thing. Don't just do this with senior leaders. Involve the young people in this discussion as well. The younger people tend to be more malleable in their thinking, more neuroplastic. It just is true. You and I know that. Ask people at not just the top line, but also the front line. So that's education. And then from that place, now start incorporating systems on how you can educate your people through internal and external resources. So the first was camaraderie. The second was education. The third is contribution. And here I'm talking about corporate social responsibility. And I'm talking about heart-based, consciousness-based corporate social responsibility. Today, the earth is going through a paradigm change. As an individual and as an organization, we have a responsibility to support new systems that provide men, women, and children around the world a clean place to live, work, and grow and develop. Whether this is energies like, now the UAE government is already doing things like supporting clean energy, solar, wind, and so on and so forth. Get curious if you're in CSR about these things. Movements, groups, people that are doing things, for example. So I'm talking about themes in the United Arab Emirates is energy, that is non-oil energy. Okay, that's a great area. Empowerment of women. That's another huge dynamic which is developing within the United Arab Emirates and indeed around the world. And I'm proud to say that I'm proud to be part of this nation where they're doing this. And a third area I might suggest is the things that we can do now to bring awareness in the youth. And when I say youth, children and the youth, about these new paradigms, thought patterns, etc., helping youth and younger children to develop their thought patterns for what the 21st century has to offer. It's in the form of technology, that's skill sets, or attitudes, which is mindset. And when you put your mind to that, things really work. Now, there is also a relatively less privileged segment of our community that, for example, that work long hours and get paid menial amounts of money. And it's good to help them. But instead of giving them a fish so they can eat for a day, how about we teach them how to fish so they can fish for a lifetime? Support empowerment. And one step further, support the duplication of empowerment. So my teacher Basil taught me a long time ago. He said, Arjun, I'm teaching you so that you teach people to teach people, to teach people, to teach people ad infinitum. And so when you empower someone, incorporate in that empowerment process a segment a module where they now pass it on to somebody else, and that empowerment now. So we've got to create duplication. We've got to create a multiplicity effect, not just an adding effect, but a multiplication effect. And when you do that as an individual and certainly as an organization, magic happens, because this also affects teleology. Teleologically, we feel fulfilled when we contribute and add value to other people. The secret to living is giving.
Absolutely.
So yeah, 3 strategies there: camaraderie, education, contribution.
Absolutely. It also gives you a sense of purpose, which, like you said, satisfies the whole teleological aspect to human beings. Wonderful. That was fascinating. I wish we could continue talking for another hour. But Arjun, in the interest of time, I'm going to have to thank you for this amazing sharing of experiences, sharing of your knowledge. This is going to be made available to all our employees, and I know all of us will benefit and learn a lot from what you've shared with us. So thank you so much. There's a lot of gratitude in my heart for you, for your time. So thanks a bunch for this. Is there anything else that you would like to share as a parting note before we bid adios? and look forward to a second call with you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, Sajni. I'd like to commend the leaders of your organization, of the Bukhadir Group, for taking this initiative. What you're doing here is absolutely fabulous. Uh, Sadly, very few organizations actually add value to their staff, their employees through this kind of empowerment. This is very enriching to people, to the teams in your company. So my commendations, my praise as an outsider to all of you in this organization for doing this for yourselves and for your teams, and by so doing, by helping your customers and community as a whole. So well done. I'm really impressed, and I am in awe of what you guys are doing. Please continue.
Thank you so much, Arjun. Thank you so much. And on that note, I'm going to say thank you and maybe write into you again to continue this conversation, because I think a lot of things crept up which I would like to talk more about and know more about. For instance, the whole thing about the reading bit is something that really fascinates me. A little more about the CSR bit. So we're going to get in touch with you for more conversations. I wish you a lot of luck. I wish you great health, and may you grow and prosper. Thank you so much for your time. We highly appreciate it.
Thank you. We'll see you again. Good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.